Hey, Joe. Mike Charobee here again, your friend the Chief, back in September. Labor Day is hit. It's time to kind of rethink about the future. For me, with today's guest, staffing, right? And human resources, and finding talent, specifically in the cybersecurity space, has been tremendously hard. Just from my experience of seeing folks in leadership and being part of the CISO roundtable, lots of different challenges around there. Specifically in Charlotte, what we've seen is not enough talent. And some folks, some leaders, sharing with me, is saying like, "Hey, look, they bring talent on and they either take those skills and they leave pretty fast and they get paid a ton of money. And maybe there's not enough room to go up in cyber because the business sees it maybe a little more operational, and it's tough to kind of add those seats. But also, again, a lot of competition here in Charlotte with some of the big Fortune 500s that have bigger rosters and bigger teams. So with that said, you put your CIO hat on, what was your thinking at the end of the year, in your CIO roles of, how would you get more budget for more staff members? Were there certain strategies that you would use, or how would you kind of go about growing your team?
Great question, Mike. I think thinking back, typically resources are always a challenge to get the CFO of the companies I've worked for to kind of release that purse string. But it always came back to value or risk. Either you're driving top line revenues or improving the bottom line somehow, or you're managing risk. And I tend to talk to the folks I coach and say those really are the only reasons you ever do anything. It's top line, bottom line, or risk. And so you really have to hone your message and simplify it. And that's how I've had success. In the case of cyber resources in my previous CIO role, the most recent one, I did have to make that case. And we argued that the platforms that we produce go into people's homes. They have embedded software and firmware, and we really needed a program to really ensure that platform was safe and didn't cause undue harm to our customers and to our own brand. And so that's where I think you can get forward-thinking C-suite execs to kind of think about that and look forward to thinking about it more than, it's not just an IT thing, it's really a business thing.
Yeah, and you've been doing a lot of consulting, right? With your recently retired, so to speak, and you're you're getting closer to the year anniversary, right, than the half year. So with that, what are you seeing out there in regards to hiring challenges? Obviously, we have a pandemic going on. Like, where are some of maybe the opportunities, or where are some of the challenges? Like, what are you seeing out there?
I do see movement in the markets that I'm familiar with and I interact in. Software engineering resources, scaled agile, Scrum type resources are still hot. Cyber is absolutely a hot commodity right now, hot topic. There's a huge shortage. I've seen some recent numbers. I think our guest today can probably give some stats on that. But cyber is fascinating because there's so many different new cybersecurity certifications that weren't there, say, 10 years ago, and it's almost a little bit overwhelming. Partnering with the right resources really makes a whole lot of sense to me. But I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing that in the companies that I'm collaborating with and working with and advising. And I'm making my way through those organizations as part of an enterprise risk management framework. And you may have heard me say this on other podcasts, Mike. I always believe that digital transformation is more about transforming the way executives think about technology and risk. So they've got to reprogram their own thinking and their own expectations about cybersecurity and risk management. And that's the transformation that I see beginning to occur more broadly in companies that I work with.
With that, I think it kind of lands right into our guest today. So who do we have on the show?
Well, we're thrilled to have Matt Donato with us today. I've certainly got to know Matt over the years. In my role as CIO, he helped me actually land a very talented cybersecurity resource that I think is still employed at my prior company. And he's now a managing director at Cyber SN. Just joined them a few months back, and he's got some innovative techniques and methods that they use we'll ask about in a moment. But he's also a member of the board of advisors at North Carolina Technology Association, which is a pretty cool organization. And then he also was a co-founder and managing partner of HuntSource, an innovative recruiting and search firm that spent most of their energy and focus on cybersecurity talent. Spent a decade or so with the crew partners and had some other phenomenal experiences. Matt, welcome to the program. Anything I missed that you want to highlight?
No, that was a better synopsis than I can give. So thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
Welcome.
You're welcome. You know, at the outset of the podcast, we were talking before we got on. You were talking about some innovative ways that you match the needs of employers and cybersecurity resources. I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on that and how the idea came to your organization and how has it been received by hiring companies.
Yeah, well, the traditional way of recruiting talent in general, whether it be accounting professionals, technology, human resources, sales, marketing, has been it's been pretty inefficient, rather cumbersome. It could be a sprint and a marathon at times. You know, you kind of get trapped in technology and a black hole of resumes, of which have not been qualified, of which verbiage and vernacular and language being used is not aligned with the core competency of your position and vice versa. And then you get the human on the phone or in the interview, in this case, in a Zoom setting or what have you, and then you realize there's a personality, there's a subjective alignment with your business, and that may or may not fit. And so therein lies just a big imperfection and creates a challenging process. So there has to be a better way. One of the things that was really attractive in looking and talking to Deidre Diamond and the team here at CyberSN was the platform No More that they have created and we've taken to market, and has really, in my opinion, changed the way that the matching and the search process has come underway. And I think it's really going to make things a lot more streamlined for organizations. Our platform No More is designed specifically for cybersecurity professionals, and by using the common language and taxonomy aligned with the nice cybersecurity workforce framework, it really alleviates any shade of gray. It's black and white. So you create a job description by using our platform. It really aligns the breakdown of their core competencies, the functional breakdown of these positions to be very, very tight. It's very targeted, and it will align with the candidates that we have in our ecosystem. So we've really worked hard to find better solution out there than just posting and praying that you're going to get a response to a position or building a resume and hoping that it finds its way into a hole that's going to actually be viewed by human versus just falling into an applicant tracking system, of which is use keywords and Boolean strings to align with the candidate's profile, which again is very imperfect.
That's fantastic. So how long has the platform been around?
Platform has been around now for a couple of years. I think the genesis of it was obviously, again, just to really improve the process, to make it a lot more streamlined, leveraging technology. And really over the last 12 to 18 months, I've really taken it to the next level. We just launched another version of it recently. We have some other tweaks that we're making now, constantly getting feedback from candidates, constantly getting feedback from clients, from users of the platform. There obviously, our technology team is looking at us as recruiters, as practitioners, to share user experience and really trying to improve the intricacies of the platform. So it's really started to propel into the next hemisphere, which I think could be really game changing.
And you know, given the crazy COVID-19 period that we're in, what are the implications for the platform? Has it helped or hurt, or how's it sort of been received in light of the pandemic?
Well, I think it's making, well, great question and a loaded one. So let me try to be as concise as I can. I think in short, for stakeholders, decision makers that are hiring people for their team, they could ditch the traditional method of creating a job description, because we all know that's wildly subjective and inaccurate. You're using a previously used job description, or you're going out to Indeed or another aggregator and you're looking at other job descriptions. Maybe some people, I would say maybe some, are using frameworks or going to SANS or using NIST, recommended language, and they're trying to embed some of that language in their job description, but it may not reflect the core focus of the position itself. So therein lies a flaw from the onset. And so, by using this type of job description and creating a profile that way really allows you to use, again, the common language. We have 35 job categories that we've created that aligns with NICE, and it's really enhanced the accuracy and the breakdown of every position. In COVID, it's obviously everyone's working in a decentralized format. We're all virtual. There's interviews that are still happening. Jobs are still being filled. People are still hiring. May not be at the speed, at the rapid pace that we were experiencing prior to this, but it's still happening. There's still a shortage of supply. There's still a healthy demand. This has certainly created a little bit of a a little bit of a challenge trying to match in place, but the platform does alleviate a lot of that. And as long as we're coordinating and driving the process efficiently on the back end and providing our human touch and closing candidates and shepherding these people through the process, then it's still wildly efficient.
Just love to hear your thoughts around, what types of resources companies are looking for. And by the way, are you recruiting, sort of on the eastern seaboard of the U.S., or is it a national search, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so so CyberSN has been around since 2014, based in Boston. That's really the sounding footprint. Deidre Diamond, our CEO, was one of the first VP of sales for Rapid7, and that obviously accelerated her visibility and career in the cybersecurity technology space. That's the foundation of the company. Several years ago, we launched a presence out in San Francisco, and that's been wildly successful. So from a physical geolocation standpoint, it's been the Northeast and the West Coast, but we've been able to service clients all throughout North America and starting to actually do some work overseas, which is obviously a different can of worms to open. I came on board to stand up the DMV, the DC Metro market, as well as the Southeast region. And we all know that's a big region in itself with lots of growth. So we're able to get to a lot of people that way.
And so typically, what are the 3 or 4 different sort of resources companies are looking for? Is it CISO level, or is it cyber analysts? What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, I don't know the exact data, but I think 80 to 85% of the jobs that we have filled to date have been practitioners. So the positions that we fill encompass both technical and non-technical positions up and down the food chain, but anywhere from analysts to engineers to developers to architects. Definitely some management level positions, but of course, as you know, Joe, the higher up the food chain you get, the less layers of management there are, even in large organizations. Having said that, a lot more organizations are trying to mature their posture, and by doing so, they're having to bring on CISOs and executives that lead security and build a program. So we've been, over the last 2 to 3 years, have been getting more and more requirements to service that. But by and large, it's been practitioners and middle management leaders that have been more functional.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the breakdown of where the demand is, it's interesting to see these trends. I mean, everything is cloud right now, or trying to get in that direction. So a lot of cloud security, both from both architects and engineers, really to operationalize and really to own the domain, whether it be Azure, AWS, et cetera. We've seen a lot of that. Obviously, with the insurgence of breaches over the last 2 years, we're seeing a lot of incident response. People that can handle those engagements, that can manage those breaches from infancy to grave. That's been a huge focal point, and obviously with that does come digital forensics. So a lot of cyber investigations being led. We've seen a lot of security operations. I think SecOps is always going to be in demand. People need eyes on glass. They need people to analyze these logs. They need to be able to look through what's going on, the network traffic, understanding what's happening, looking and eliminating false positives, and assessing where the threat landscape is. We've started to see some more, maybe not as of late, but red team and penetration testing was obviously, companies are trying to get more to a proactive state. So we definitely have seen a lot more of that. I think what we will see, and this is a prediction, not necessarily, it's more of an opinion, not necessarily a fact. I think in this decentralized state, you're going to start to see some companies rear their ugly head in terms of their culture, and you're going to start to see some top grading of management, and that could be CISO level down to just managers of small teams.
Yeah, that whole centralized, decentralized shadow IT thing. I had a an acquaintance that used to say, "I don't mind shadow IT as long as it's my shadow that's being cast." But
Right.
but that's an interesting challenge that I continually run into. Is you've got business units that have gone off and deployed technology on their own, built a website, done a bunch of different things, and they're unaware of the trappings of cyber criminals and what they might try to throw at you. And so I think that this whole cloud movement has accelerated some of that shadow IT. Are you seeing, in terms of the resources you're bringing on, folks that are skilled at trying to sell the virtues of their cyber programs across the enterprise, or are you seeing that at all?
Yes and no. I think it depends on the company, the industry that they're in, how highly regulated it is. I guess how global it is, how much visibility, and what the threat landscape looks like. That's typically the answer, right? To your basic question is, well, it depends.
Mhm.
There's a lot to that. I think by and large, small and large businesses, both public and private, have all unequivocally realized the importance of cybersecurity, and I think they understand that there's invariable risk that does exist with their environment, with the data that they have. Lots of hot topics around third-party risk. Now, fourth-party risk, understanding who you're partnering with, both directly and indirectly. So I think therein lies an opportunity for a lot of organizations to really capture what that is. What kind of is that in this program, or is it not? Where does it sit? Does it sit under the purview of the CIO, the chief risk officer, if we have one, the CFO, if we have one? Again, that just comes down to size and scale of a business. But by and large, there's definitely been over the last 2-3 years, I would say, a positive step in the right direction. Unfortunately, there still underlies this shortage of talent, and there's a
Right.
massive gap between the demand and the supply. Um, I think the COVID-19 has presented an interesting opportunity. I wouldn't quite call it a silver lining, but for a lot of organizations that have struggled to be flexible with their culture and flexible with their environment, this has kind of forced their hand to definitely be so. And a lot of traditional, I would put this in air quotes, traditional kind of legacy, butts and seats Monday to Friday, this has pretty much debunked that model and figure out, well, how strong is your culture? How engaged is your talent? How satisfied are your employees? And this has become more of a question and a test of retention and an opportunity for practitioners that you have.
Yeah, it's just, it's a great point. I think with the shortage of cybersecurity resources across the U.S. and around the globe, it is driving more and more people to the profession. And I've always had a difficult time trying to figure out with someone's background, how much expertise do they really have, or do they just go get a certification from one of the many known programs that are out there? How do you sort of filter out, kind of real talent versus, paper-based talent?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're definitely a credentially driven society. I've talked about this before, and I'll continue to bang that drum. I don't think bad actors really care about what your credentials are, as long as you can capture something, as long as you can get into a network, as long as your attack vectors and the way you approach things from an adversary standpoint, as long as you're able to do that successfully, nothing else really matters. So why should we be any different? Having said that, there is a baseline and a standard that needs to be met on a corporate level. Businesses have to have certain baselines. So to your question, the best way to unpack that is simply just to understand what they've made, what they've saved, what they've achieved. What kind of accomplishments do they have throughout their tenure? I mean, what kind of milestones have they hit? What have you actually done that's been of value to the organization? And can you quantify it? Can you articulate the story? And that could come down to projects, integration of tools, deployment of tools, programs that have been built or led. We're always looking for stories and the details of those stories to understand, have they really done what they say they could do. Now, we do see a lot of people entering into this domain, and people are getting cross training, which is great to see. And I think more and more businesses need to be advocating for an investment to be made in training in cybersecurity. It doesn't just need to be a technology problem; it's a business problem. It's everyone could be working towards the same mission in protecting our environment, our information, intellectual property, etc. It doesn't just need to be isolated to the information security team. So it's nice to see professionals cross-train, get certifications, and then it's just a matter of the depth and breadth of their experience.
Yeah, so many questions based on that dialogue. I think one of the other big trends that I see, and that you guys are clearly probably focused on and trying to get your heads around, is the federal government's new programs. The most prominent one being CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification process.
Yep.
I'm starting to see that particular framework show up in public sector companies, and it's interesting because I was talking to somebody about this the other day, where you look at, say, they've got a maturity level now in this program where you have to be a third party assessed. You can't just say I'm CMMC level 3. You have to get a third party assessor to do that.
Yep.
And they have a whole process around that that's unfolding right now. But you look at the 20 controls that they've added on top of the NIST, what we're all familiar with, NIST 171, NIST 53, for those folks out there that love, acronyms.
Right.
But those 20 controls, and people say, gee, there's 180 controls now. That's just overwhelming. Isn't that too much cybersecurity? And you look at them and you say to yourself, which one of those would you not want? You don't want email protection. You don't want impersonation protection. You start to break it down, and you realize these are things that are just missing from the other frameworks. Do you find yourself having to kind of keep pace with those sorts of frameworks as they come up, and are companies asking for individuals that have that sort of expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to that, we have to be knowledgeable of the different, the different use cases that are out there, the different events, the news, the events that happen. I mean, from breaches to different techniques to different skill sets. I mean, a year has not gone by since that I've been in this profession to where I haven't seen another year went by where I've seen just the same skill sets. There's been new skill sets that have emerged as a result of a lot of different these changes. A lot of them is from these different frameworks that have been put into place. You talk about the vendor community and CMMC. I think that's going to set the standard going forward for any third party to any organization, not just to the DoD and what that does up and downstream for vendors. But I think that's really going to tighten the controls for a lot of the way companies do business and assessing their maturity. And this model really is going to be a nice baseline for us going forward, and it really is going to improve the way organizations look at how they run their business. I think it's difficult to keep up with, which is part of the thesis that we have, is you need to be laser focused in the domain of security. You can't just be servicing it fractionally. You need to be dialed in 100% all in. That was my stance before at my previous firm. That's still my stance now. And I'm just fortunate to be with an organization that completely not only buys into that, but really practices what they preach. Additionally, we have a security team here internally, so they're constantly keeping us apprised of what's happening. The threat landscape changes. There's lots of different types of techniques that are out there. While we're not subject matter experts in that context, we're knowledgeable of what's happening, at least on the surface, to at least engage candidates, clients, et cetera, to understand what's happening. How does this apply or not apply? There are a number of occasions, Joe, where we'll have conversations with clients and or candidates or potential clients, and we'll just be talking shop a bit about what their environment is experiencing, issues that they've had, or maybe more bigger picture initiatives that they're trying to accomplish strategically. And it's a different conversation than just talking about, I need humans to fill these positions. It's more of a consultative discussion and more of a strategic one.
Yeah, this is just anecdotal. I don't have stats to back it up, but one thing I've noticed, first of all, I completely agree that the landscape for cyber has changed and is changing, I think, almost faster than any other professional segment within the technology sector. It's constantly evolving. You've got as a service providers coming up to speed with security operations centers and SIM and all kinds of event detection and response solutions. It's almost overwhelming. But one thing I've observed is I see a lot more diversity in the talent pool in cyber than I have historically in, say, the systems administration side of the house or the more traditional IT functions. Is that something that you're seeing as well, more women and minorities?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the prideful things that we've been able to accomplish here. Not to plug Cyber SN, but we're a women-owned business. We've intentionally, since inception of this company, have focused on diversity. I mean, as a woman in the tech industry, our CEO and founder, Deidre Diamond, understood the challenges that women face in technology, from hostile work environments to the lack of investment for venture capitalists to just having kind of a good old boys club running things, right? And then you add security to that, so you're dealing with much more kind of downward pressure on, not only is that field diversifying and becoming more complex, but you've got an emerging talent pool as a result of that. So we're going to get the residuals as a byproduct. And so for us, diversity is key to addressing the issues. We're not just, again, placing talent in positions. It's helping companies to develop women in diverse, underrepresented talent in that community, and intentionally leaning into that, and advising companies to really having that discussion, like what is your diversity and inclusion strategy? What's the landscape of your team now? Where do you want to be in 3-5 years? What programs or initiatives are you taking to improve some of those statistics? And so, it's been great and very pleasant to see, joining this organization, to see that there's been such a concerted effort made in that direction, and we've been able to accomplish so much. But to your point, there's still a massive gap in diversity and in specifically within women, and just looking at the underrepresented community there in that regard.
Yeah. I've had the good fortune of working with Teresa Payton and her company here locally. They provided services to our company, my last CIO gig, and I'm actually doing some work for them now for one of their clients. And so Teresa has been a staunch advocate for diversity and celebrates
Yep.
minority and female successes in the industry, and so she's been a strong voice too, and it's great to see, and our industry needs it. Curious to know, what are you finding, especially as a result of COVID? Are you finding people reacting and then saying, I need help, we've just had to move to the cloud and we had a breach? Is it reactive hiring, or is it more planful hiring? Is there a balance there?
Before COVID hit, there was definitely more proactive approaches, more forward thinking, looking ahead. Now it's with the disruption of the first 2 to 3 months specifically. When COVID-19 hit, people were just having to react. I think there was so much fatigue, and I think they're looking back. If you ask any cybersecurity professional, I don't care what level you are in the food chain in the organization, you are probably working much longer than 50 or 60 hours a week. You're just trying to keep and maintain an operational state. And we were talking to a lot of folks who, quite frankly, were just shifting their priorities to focus on that. Now, there was a lot of companies that were having to, if they don't have a cloud environment and they're still very much on-prem and using data centers, like, what are we going to do? Do we have the machines to support a decentralized workforce? There's a lot of reactive, steps being taken. That's just one of several examples. On the hiring front, we're starting to see some of that come back around. I mean, keep in mind, summer's always kind of a quieter time anyway. There were some people kind of moving mountains quickly to find budget, even though they were on a hiring freeze or they were sitting tight on spending any money at all, to put some resources in place. That's where we've seen a little bit of a surge in professional services in general. And I think we fall into that category as a staffing solutions firm, to where ProServe in general has picked up quite a bit just to offset some of the capability gaps that these organizations had. I do think once things turn around and once we get on the other side of this, we pass through this election, which is certainly in a lot of people's eyes a disruptor, maybe others an opportunity, it certainly adds another layer of noise and kind of buyer reluctancy, if you will. I do think there's going to be a lot more. We're going to get back to an operational normal state, and there's going to be a lot more of a proactive approach.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that, and the downside of, the work from home, event due to COVID has, created some new cybersecurity vulnerabilities in a lot of companies, and they're reacting to it. But I'm hopeful that it creates more of a digital transformation mindset that we talked about at the very outset, that more executives are expecting more and thinking more about their own brand and protecting customer data and that sort of thing. It's just fascinating to me. In terms of recruiting too, I love to hear how you're doing that. How are you finding talent? And then sort of a follow up to that is how have you partnered with companies? Because you and I both know that I've worked for some companies that are human resource departments don't want anybody partnering with them. They want to do all the recruiting on their own. And I've always been a huge believer and finding the right partner to because you've got the engine to do the searching and qualify those resources. So how are you finding all of that? How are you finding resources? How are you finding clients? And how are you knocking down those barriers with HR organizations?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, you have to be receptive to any and all avenues, and that includes partnerships. We are very much open to that. We recently partnered with a large global technology staffing firm that doesn't really have expertise in cybersecurity. They saw a blind spot and a gap. We saw an opportunity to be able to leverage and synergize what we both have, and so we're leveraging that. And so in terms of how and the way we're finding, traditional ways of finding talent won't ever, in my opinion, become obsolete. Maybe I'm just saying that because I'm biased. I don't want my job to be replaced by a robot, but I don't think that will, at least in my lifetime. Maybe it will, maybe I won't, maybe I'm naive. I don't know. There's always a compelling story to go to market and articulate a story to a company. If you work for ABC or XYZ Incorporated, there's a lot of the culture, the interesting parts about why you want to work for that company, what's unique about their benefits, what's unique about their environment, what are they doing to separate themselves. There's business discussions to be had before you even get to the position itself. That requires someone to really articulate that story. And so, fundamentally, that's one of the baselines here is that, that's one of the pieces that we try to qualify on from the onset. Additionally, using the Know More platform, using technology, it allows our search to be a lot more targeted versus taking more of a shotgun approach. And I think you would agree, having been a buyer, right, that a lot of folks out there more often than not will take a shotgun approach and they'll throw a bunch of things at you in hopes that one or two will stick. And you can tell when you start to have those conversations with those candidates, assuming that you even liked what you saw, that they may not be aligned for what you're looking for. So really qualifying that on the front end is an integral part of the start of the process. And then once that journey unfolds, it's knowing where to look. So partnering and aligning with, veterans transition out of the military to non-for-profits, to communities, to organizations such as ISSA or ISACA, or looking at B-sides and a lot of different communities within this smaller community that have talent, that are the thought leaders that are there, that are involved in different types of organizations. Referrals, word of mouth, I still believe no matter what kind of consumption of information or buying experience, and I hate to use that word, but it's really what it comes down to. People want to have a positive experience. And so, really have to pride yourself in giving to someone a positive experience, setting expectations, making sure that the partnership that you do have is something that you'd want to experience if you're going through that. So really trying to empathize is going to be very important as well. And those are traditional, more fundamental things, and then leverage the technology capabilities that we have really makes it kind of a dynamic duo.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, and I think in terms of partnering with firms like yours, I've always been an advocate, and you end up getting into conversations internally within organizations when you want to partner. They look at the recruiting fees and they say, well, that's too expensive, we'll do it ourselves. But in the end, when you have to go find the resources on your own and you spend, I don't know, countless hours, I think in order to find one person, you're interviewing a dozen or so or more people, and you're spending a lot of time and a lot of people's time inside the organization. And then you may not have the right filter, the right lens, and I love the specialty aspect of what you guys do. And I would advocate for our listeners to, if you're not doing that, you ought to consider doing it, because you'll get those resources faster, you'll get them onboarded faster, and you'll get them hitting the ground running faster. And in the end, it's actually a lot more economical and better for business when you do that. And it's not a paid political message here. I'm telling you my own experience.
It's funny. I had my own company before this, and believe it or not, we paid a recruiter to find us talent. So we realized that we were our own worst customer. And so I firmly believe in the hidden costs associated with time and utility and the energy that's required. And sometimes you are too close to it. Sometimes you
Yeah.
are not looking through the right lens. And so I'd rather engage an expert to do something and pay a little bit of a premium for that, because I know it's going to save me time and energy in the long run. Not to mention getting it right the first time for anything you do in life, I believe is where you should focus your time and energy.
I've had a number of people ask me about as a service models, especially in the cyberspace with security operations centers and SIM and all the other various flavors of cyber. And while I think that that's a trend, I don't think I can't see a future where you don't have permanent resources on staff to do incident response, to write policies. You've got to know something about the organization in order to make this stuff work effectively. And you have to keep track of it and monitor it. And you got to know the personalities. And that's harder to do
Yep.
when you outsource all of that. You can outsource the sort of the dial tone aspect of it, but you can't outsource the rest because so much of it is human based, and having those human relationships is so key.
Yeah, it's a great point, because, and I certainly won't segue down this road, but if you really truly want to make it part of your organization's mission, and you want your customers and your people to feel safe, to feel protected, and you want to use that as part of your competitive advantage, then it truly needs to be part of your team. And it can't just be a borrowed service, like you said. It could be a hybrid for sure, but at the end of the day, you need some people to own it and to
Right.
drive it and to build that awareness and drive training throughout the organization. Because like I said initially, and I'll say it again, it's really a business problem. And if you look at a lot of the issues that occur, a lot of the breaches, a lot of it's based on insider threat. Right? And that's just the average Joe or Jane clicking on a malicious email, or perhaps maybe plugging in something into the environment that's not been approved, or there's been a privileged access issue, or many different cases, but you get the idea. So it's just the
Yeah.
average person not being aware of what they're doing, because we're all operating, with little resources at time and moving too quickly.
Yeah, it's been fun to kind of watch the evolution and with all of the work from home activity over the last 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months now. I've had a number of conversations with cyber experts that say that what they teach people in the office is now finding its way at home, because you've got both, say, spouses are working at home, the kids are there, they're all going to school again. All of a sudden, the cyber threats, your own Wi-Fi network, have you changed your default password? All those sorts of things are starting that you get familiar with in the corporate world are now finding their way into people's homes. I don't know if you're seeing that yourself in terms of some of the folks you're talking to as well.
Well, other than me having to change mine personally, then yes, if we are seeing that, we're definitely hearing about it. There was
Yeah,
definitely some
let me know if you
campaigns.
haven't changed yours, because I'd like
Yeah,
to do a
yeah.
drive-by
Maybe
and
we
check
can go
it
ahead
out.
and edit this part out of the podcast. So I don't have some jerk that's really looking to take advantage of it. A little late for them, but anyways, no one's really.
They're already in there
They're
by
already in.
now.
I'm about to say you're never really protected. It's not a matter of if, it's just when, right? No, we definitely saw a lot of campaigns, especially early on, where organizations were having to get in front of that first and foremost. They had to shift their priorities, and that was one of the top priorities that they did have. Is all right, let's make sure that people working from home have the right devices, have the right access to technology, and do we have the right processes? And we saw a lot of initiatives being led around, well, we don't really have a process for that, or we don't really have guidance for this, so we need to get a lot more hands-on and ingrained in terms of what we do have and what we don't.
The chief and I have had a number of discussions with companies and with cybersecurity providers around the landscape, and there's a lot of confusion out there in terms of what tools, what processes, what skill sets you need. And Chief, your thoughts on that? I mean, you and I have had a lot of discussions with a lot of different companies about how to respond, how to react, and should we partner or not on that front.
I think you talked about it first, is the business acumen, right? And it comes from the top, right? What's their, and you probably see it more often, Joe, is it's about the risk, right? And do they have those conversations? It's either part of their culture or not, right? And does it come from the CFOs? Does it come from the legal team? I've been with Fortune 500s where, super, like, I mean, to get anything through red lines takes forever. And even coming down to the point where customers had to spend a certain amount of monies in order to even get an audience with the legal team, right? So, and then I've been on the other side where, hey, they'll do anything, right? They'll it's wide open, which again shows that they're a little bit more open to risk. Maybe they wouldn't shut it down. So again, I think it comes down to the nature of the C-suite, and it's a top-down mechanism, right? Is how much risk is there? But I also got to imagine too is current state versus future state, right? It's like, hey, how long is this C-suite going to be there, and how much risk do they know that's on the line? If these people are ready to maybe retire or move on to a new role, I think if they're ready to retire and they're going to milk this thing for as long as they can, and they know that there's risk, I would assume they'd probably be willing to invest into making sure that, that island is still, at low tide, or at high tide, they can still get on the beach, right? Where, you get a cyber attack these days. It's, how do you survive? That's the other thing. So we've fortunately onboarded, a vendor, right, that really kind of gives a lot of visibility in that space. So that's the thing, right? I think it comes down to the data and how can you prove it and see where it's at. And if you can find the right partners, then you can build the right program. But at the end of the day, as we all know, if the top of the food chain, if they aren't bought in, if they're not all in, it's gonna be a long day.
Yeah, it makes it a lot harder. I think one of the things that I've learned, sometimes the hard way throughout my career is strong partners. And I really mean the word partnership. And we found a number of companies that I know as part of your cyber buyer program and your tech buyer program that fit that bill. But I know Matt personally, and I've worked with him on and off for the last several years, and know of his high integrity, and vouch for Matt. If anybody out there is looking for, to find someone to talk to about filling resources, Matt is an honest individual and super trustworthy, and someone I put my confidence in. So, and that's what you need because the landscape's changing so rapidly. Companies like Matt's, can keep pace with that and keep their eye out for the skill sets that are needed in its an evolving, ever-changing sort of landscape, as we talked about.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of too many others. Matt, I'd love to hear, any other thoughts you might have. War stories. You got any good stories about crazy recruiting activities?
Well, it's not crazy. Put me on the spot. We've experienced and seen some interesting trends over the last 6 months specifically. I mean, we're all kind of hunkered down. We've been, either at home more than we've ever been before, consuming more Netflix or whatever streaming platform you may use, maybe consuming more other things, and I will just leave that one alone. And those of us with young kids have been consuming more, have had more time to spend with them, for better or for worse. In my case, better, obviously. But it's been an interesting run, and I went through the last downturn in '08, and people at first were comparing this recession, this softer, more challenging period to that, but this was a lot different. This was sudden. It was a higher impact. It created a lot more of uncertainty, and then we're all fighting the same enemy. It's invisible, and there was a lot of unanswered questions, and there still are. I think we've all been able to agree, as much as there's a lot of noise and a lot of confusion and a lot of, quite frankly, frustration out there in some areas. There's a lot of positives that are coming out of this. And I know everyone says hashtag do away with 2020. There's a lot of funny slogans out there about I could do without 2020. Let's move on. But it's presented a lot of interesting opportunities, and I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for the future for this company and what we could do. I will say one thing that I'm pretty pumped about as well is, we're doing a lot of leadership connectivity opportunities in the community. We've had some virtual town halls, we've had some roundtables, and so definitely not one to plug that, but certainly would encourage people to take a look at our forums and some of the content that we're pushing out. There's a lot of really educational stuff out there that we're pushing. You and I both would agree that there's a lot of sources of content and probably get a little bit worn down by it. We pushed some really interesting stuff. We're really trying to lean into that and be very intentional with the thought leadership. But unrelated to what you were saying, but something I did want to add is I'm pretty excited about seeing some of the stuff that comes out of here.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate it. I think I don't imagine the next 6 months are as predictable as we'd like them to be, but I know that cyber will still be a hot topic.
Yes,
6 months from now,
it's
maybe.
Not going anywhere.
No, it's not going to. I get my understanding is that cyber criminals don't care if you're changing jobs or if you're going on PTO or
why would they?
You're off for the
right?
evening.
I mean, money never sleeps, as they say, and this is very much monetarily driven by a lot of people. So it's look, and that's why if you're not, you need to be encouraging your security team, your pros that you have, to give them a lot of support, make them feel as happy and as welcomed as you can. I hate to put this in here, but pay them more money. Look at the market, see where they are in comps in comparison to others. They need to be well compensated. I've talked to too many people that have been working literally 7 days a week around the clock, trying to keep their organization afloat. So we talked about that reactive versus proactive thing, and there's been a lot of reactive stuff as a result of this, but we will get through it. And once we do, we'll be in a better place. And then, the rest is yet to come.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, for layman terms, for folks who might be listening to the podcast that aren't as familiar with cyber and the importance, at the end of the day, if you're an executive, here's the deal. Like, there are nation states across the globe that are training and spend a ton of money training people to be cyber experts, right? To break into your stuff if they need to break into your stuff. So think about the trickle down effect of that, right? If that person has that job or not, right? They lose their job, something happens military wise. What's the next thing they can do? All they need is the internet connection to start making money. So that's the bare bones of it. They're getting unbelievable training at the highest levels to break into your stuff. That's how serious it is.
Yep.
The military has
Sure.
always been there. And I was listening to a podcast for the holiday with Joe Rogan, who that's why I got into podcasting years ago before he even got, super popular. And he had the director of oh man, I'm having a senior moment here. What's his name? With he had Platoon and he had Born on the 4th of July. It was
I know you're talking about. I can see the dude's face. I probably have heard it. I'm a big Joe Rogan fan. I've been following his podcast for years.
But he's been doing he's controversial with JFK and with Kevin Costner. It'll come to me in a minute. He also did Scarface, but anyways, what he had said based on history, he's got some history stuff going out there, and what he mentioned was it's all a military machine, right? The whole world is, and from day one, that's where the money is at, and if that's where all the training is. For me personally, being in telecommunications, we had a lot of great, highly talented people that were trained in the military on telecommunications, and that's why our telecommunications were so good over the years. The companies that I was with, because we had those military experts, right? Without that, I don't know if there's budget to train those folks for paying $10 for your phone line, right? So it's very interesting. So where do you see the military change in regards to opportunity and staffing? Are there markets there? Because there are some organizations that are targeting folks that have military experience to come in and work in IT.
Yeah, huge opportunity and great point. You said something that resonates with just our community and culture as a whole. Not a lot of praise and not a lot of gratitude is given oftentimes, or enough rather, to our veterans. And so there's so many more ways we can be deploying the talent that comes out of there, the training, the discipline that they get, the knowledge that they acquire, and there's so much more application that we can use. I think there's certainly a huge opportunity for that. I think a lot of organizations are doing a fantastic job of capturing those resources and putting them into their environment. The federal government does a great job of that. As much criticism as we want to give our federal government, they really do a fantastic job in certain communities, whether it be the intelligence community or the DHS, the FBI, et cetera, of finding clear talent who have been tried and true and have the stripes to prove it. And then our interaction on the private sector, the commercial side, our interaction with the federal community and how we partner with one another. A lot of the theme in this conversation, guys, has been around partnerships. And I think if you're not for it, then you're part of the problem. In my opinion, not necessarily part of the solution. So figure out a way to embed yourself in that community, work together towards a common goal, and focus on that in the greater mission. I think one of the knocks, perhaps, if there is one, has been how does one coming out of a forward position, a downrange position, come into our corporate climate where we're very bureaucratic and political, and there's a soft skill that's required to mix with the culture here, and that's certainly a conversation topic and an objection that we do receive. but there's a lot of applications in the ways that you can embed those people and onboard them to make them acclimate to those environments. And there's probably a lot to be learned from them as well. It's just about figuring out the right way to integrate them into your culture. And some organizations do a great job of it, and some organizations struggle. A lot of it starts from the top and the messaging from the top. And then part of it's, do you have a human resources arm that really knows how to embed those people into your culture?
That's great. And yeah, the senior moment there was Oliver Stone. So
Oh, there you go.
and
Just a small,
controversial director.
just not a really well-known name at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got something on Netflix or I believe it's Netflix. He's got a show of the untold history of the United States. So, but again, it was just very interesting. His concept was, he always leaves kind of cliffhangers out there, and at least from my point of view in his movies, and just, some of the things, again, if you unroll everything and you look at it, hey, where's the source? Where's the money? Like you said in the beginning, right? Who has money is the king, and that where does it all start? So with that, is there anything that you'd like to, as we close up the show, that you'd like to plug, either personally or professionally? Or
No, thank you. I really just want to thank you guys for having me on. Definitely check us out, cyberascend.com. Reach out to me personally, whether it be on LinkedIn. I really don't use Twitter anymore. It's too much noise, too much of a distraction. But certainly you can contact anybody in our company. They're more than equipped to help you. Check out Secure Diversity as well. That's our sister company, our 501c3 that we're really proud of. We're really making waves with that. It's certainly a great platform that we've been able to do to build over the years. That's captured a lot of the what we've talked about before in the underserved market. But yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Last thing, okay, you're the CISO of a large billion-dollar organization. What's your draft pick if you got to build a whole brand new cyber team? Like what role are you going to pick?
Ooh, billion-dollar company. Am I global?
Sure. Aren't we all? Once you're on
Fair enough.
the information superhighway, you can go anywhere.
My first pick would probably be, I probably would need someone hands-on who really understands security ops and who really understands the tools, and also knows how to work with vendors, because you're by and large going to be working with a service provider of sorts, whether it's MSP or a consulting firm, to help you kind of operationalize and stand up a program. And I certainly would use a firm to help you find that person, if there's your cheesy sales plug, because doing it on your own can be tough, unless you've got a tried and true person that you know and you trust who will follow you. I certainly wouldn't try to do it all on your own. And if you're hiring that person in a greenfield program, don't expect the CISO to do everything, because that's not in their skill set, nor should it be.
Right.
Joe, anything you'd like to say?
No, just great advice, Matt. Thanks. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will too as well.
Great. Excellent, guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
All right,
yeah, you too. Thanks.